Hi, good evening, everybody. We'll be starting in the next 10 minutes, requesting everybody who's outside having their tea and coffee to please wrap up in 10 minutes and join us inside. Thank you. Good evening. Calling out to all our guests who are still outside. Please do next 5 minutes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's begin the evening. A very, very good evening to all of you. On behalf of Times of India, I, Divya Sharma, welcome you all to the Right to Excellence Budget Masterclass, a summit uniting policymakers, experts, and finance gurus to decode all the announcements made by the Finance Minister. Rooted in the right to movement championed by the Times of India, our collective vision envisions a future where India excels across various sectors. I'd like to begin by taking a moment to thank our title sponsor, Nexa. Now, the focus of this summit is to unravel the intricacies of the union budget and gain a deeper understanding of its implications on our financial landscape. These esteemed dignitaries, experts, and speakers present here today will decipher the key components, policy implications, and the potential impacts on various sectors. Now, get ready to understand the budget from an expert's perspective so you can make informed decisions related to tax, investments, and more. Now, it is with great honor and privilege that I welcome on stage Mr. Prasad Sanyal, Business Head, timesofindia.com, to set the tone of the summit and share the opening address.
A very good afternoon to you all. The Times of India's Right to Excellence Budget Masterclass is here today, right after the Union Budget, and I extend a very warm welcome to you. The announcements made by the Finance Minister last week during the interim budget are very fresh in all of our minds. And what makes last week's budget speech more interesting is that we are in the midst of an election year. And while the main budget will be announced once the new government comes into power, the interim budget is equally crucial as in many ways it sets the tone for the upcoming elections. That's why we are all gathered here today amidst industry leaders, experts, and policymakers to understand the actual impact of last week's announcements on individuals in different sectors as well as businesses. We have a great lineup today and fireside chats that will see the participation of some really distinguished speakers who will decode this budget for us. I'm quite excited to listen to all of them, and I'm sure you're too. So let's dive straight into our masterclass and the first session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sanyal. And ladies and gentlemen, let's begin with our very first panel of the day, uncovering the profound implications of the latest tax reforms and gain strategic insights into adapting to these changes. Now, may we please have on stage Hemal Zubalia, partner Deloitte India. Please put your hands together for our guest. Gaurav Mendiratha, partner and national head, corporate and international tax, KPMG India. Mr. Prateek Jain, partner Price Waterhouse. And Mr. Naveen Wadhwa, VP Taxman. I would also like to call on stage senior journalist Mr. Bhupendra Chaubey to moderate the session.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Good to be here. Elections, in India are always exciting times. And when you talk about elections, you always talk about economy. One always looks at what are those areas where there is a kind of an interconnect between the politics and the economic spheres. Typically, just before any budget, just before any election, whenever there is a budget, we always look at the budget with a very fine political tooth comb. But I think this has been one of those rare opportunities where we have seen a budget being presented so close to the elections, and yet you wouldn't really say that this was a budget which was very high on, say, populistic narrative. And specifically in the august company of these great economic minds, people who know so much about the taxation structures, It'll be great to hear from them and their insight in terms of what they think is the trajectory of tax formulation, tax policies, and tax implementations as far as India is concerned. So let me straight away begin with you, Himal. As partner of Deloitte India, how would you look firstly as far as the question of approach to taxation is concerned by this government in this interim budget? Do we look at it as a continuation of what we've seen over the last 9 years? Do we look at this maybe as a beginning of something remarkably new, remarkably different, and maybe we'll get to know more about it in the forthcoming years?
So I think as in case of even non-tax, if you look at this government's, the first 5-year journey, their focus, the next 5-year journey, I think the same philosophy is used even in the tax formulation, i.e. the first initial term was to ensure that we get more and more taxes in organized center, whether it is about the GST, getting the black economy bill. The question is to get more and more the unorganized or which is outside the ambit to bring it into that. The next 5 years, which will last, is more on digitization and getting in, if you had seen the FM speak about the charter of the service that to provide to honest taxpayer. It's more about digitization and this. What we would see in the next one, so to answer your question, I do see the continuity, but what's about to come is actually going to be more impactful in terms of how the digital disruption would cause, because this is an area where, frankly, the tax office or administration is ahead and the corporates and people are yet to catch up.
What do you mean by that? When you say that, I mean, are we saying that policies are being formed, policies supposedly being executed, but you don't have the requisite infrastructure, human infrastructure, manpower to actually execute it with the skill set which is required?
It's not just skill set, but even the technology, Bhuven. So to take you that today, the level of analytics that the tax administration is using, industry specific, whether it's more precise, able to say that, okay, let's go and scrutinize only this kind, or exchange of information across, whether it's customs authorities and that. At times we jokingly say even at corporates level, one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. So I think in those respects, probably they have an upper hand, and it's the corporate world which needs to play a catch-up game there.
Gaurav, your thoughts on this, Gaurav? Do we, over the last, 15 years for sure, I've seen whenever the finance minister makes a budget speech, journalists always look at it from the point of view of is there relief for the income taxpayer or not. This time around, I'm seeing that everybody is almost taking it for granted. Boss, don't expect any relief because it's hey nahi. You will see what will happen in July. Throw some light for our audiences. What do we expect in July?
First of all, I think there was something for all of us in the budget. That was a grateful thanks by the finance minister. She was really gracious and say, I thank all the taxpayers for all that they do for the country, and it's going in the right places. So I think, so that was, and in an interim budget, whether you look at it 4 years, 5 years back or 10 years back, really nothing really came out. But as I see ahead, I think there is a chance, a possibility. So what has happened is that India used to follow exemption-based personal tax as well as corporate tax. I'm just mixing the two. Over the years, the philosophy of the government has been to reduce the exemptions and reduce the tax rates on the sides. So from a corporate tax standpoint, that has been done quite successfully. From a personal tax standpoint, now that new regime where you hardly get any exemptions, but the tax rate, I mean, if you earn up to 7 lakh rupees and or 7.5 lakh rupees, and if you get a standard deduction of 50,000 at 7 lakh, you're not paying any taxes. That's a big leap already that the government provided. As I see, not much can be expected from a personal tax standpoint, barring the fact that you may get a few more, ups in the exemption limits of that 7 lakh going to 8 lakhs, 8.5 lakhs. But if, as individual taxpayers, we are expecting a lot, I wouldn't be very, very positive about that.
So even in the month of July, basically, it's not as if that someone who's paying 30% tax, it's not as if 30% will become 25%, 20%. That's not going to happen.
No.
No. Okay. All right. So that we're clear on that. Please.
I believe the finance minister has set the tone for the July budget. And to understand why I'm saying so, maybe we should go back in the year 2018, Mr. Jaitley did the same thing. He appreciated the contribution of the taxpayers, and in fact, he mentioned some statistics in the parliament while presenting the budget. So he said an average tax being paid by a salary taxpayer is 75,000 rupees, and average tax being paid by a businessman is 25,000 rupees. And immediately thereafter, they announced standard deduction for the salary taxpayer. So I believe, since this is the second time that on the Parliament House, the finance minister appreciated the contribution of the taxpayers. So I personally believe there should be some motivation, some incentive for only the salary taxpayer,
I'll
not for
give
the
you,
business taxpayer.
you know, I mean, all of you follow this space in far greater detail. But Prateek, here all of us are saying that the finance minister has thanked the taxpayer. But please tell me, how many people are actually taxpayers in this country? How many people are indeed contributing to that? It's still an abysmal number in comparison to the population, in comparison to the kind of investments which are being made in the infrastructure space. Do you foresee any solution to that problem?
Yeah, you're right. But having said that, I think in the last few years, the tax base has significantly gone up. If you look at GST, it's a landmark, right? Anyway, 60 lakh people were registered earlier. Now it's 1.4 crore people who are doing it. Even for income tax, return filers has increased significantly. So we are moving in the right direction. I think few things which are coming from to me as a trend from this budget. First is tax collection targets. If you look at 11.6%, that looks moderate. I mean, today Revenue Secretary has said that on GST, he expects monthly collection to be 1.8 or 1.85 lakh crores. This year, YTD number is 1.65 lakh crore per month. If you just look at the number, it's 15.5% increase. Government is estimating 11.6. So that means they're going with realistic targets. That's one. Second is tax incentive as a tool to attract investment. We are moving away from that. You saw what happened for IT, ITS industry. There were some tax breaks earlier, special economic zones there were earlier. Manufacturing, which was supposed to expire, there was expectation that it will increase. And the government is saying that, look, 22% tax rate without exemptions is a very moderate thing. And therefore, we are not looking at tax incentive to attract investment. You're right that tax to GDP ratio in India is around 11%, and which has to go up significantly. And of course, there are many reasons. Of course, the agriculture is out and so on. You don't have an immediate solution to this. I don't think that we can expect a lot of tax breaks even for individuals. As Gaurav mentioned, 7 lakh exemption. And if you compare India with other developed, I mean, of course, India is still developing in that sense, but other developed economy, our individual tax rates are not high. Of course, you can.
Naveen, would we, if I was to look at it again from a political prism, we haven't seen the kind of brute majority which this government has had, you know, in the longest times. When the UPA was in power, we looked at it from the prism of, you know, political compulsions. But if ever there was a government and if ever there was a political entity which could have taken these bold decisions, then this would be the entity. Why do you think this question of foreign directed investment or you know, a foreign participation in the Indian economic growth story, why are we not managing to solve the tax riddle as far as this space is concerned?
I'm so sorry, guys, to say, but I believe chartered accountants are responsible for that. That the way we interpret the law, we always look for the loophole in the tax laws. And because of that, the tax laws have become so complicated, it's really, really not easy to understand it. And possibly, because of that, there is lack of certainty in the taxation laws. That could be one from the taxation angle, I can see as one of the hindrance in FDI, because they don't see certainty in the provisions in the tax laws in India, which this government has tried to solve it. They have given an assurance that there won't be any retrospective amendment in the taxation laws. And 2 years back, we also saw they gave relief to the Vodafone unanimously, wherein they have given them the refund as well. So the government is trying to solve that problem, wherein they have the certainty on the taxation laws, so that as far as the tax laws are concerned, we attract more and more FDI, and they see India as a good destination for ease of doing business.
Gaurav, you know, look at what happened. I think Dream 11 is a great example, right? Suddenly a company, a sector which was showing some signs of growth, suddenly there is a, you know, there is execution of a law. And overnight, you look at what happens to that entire space. Is there a problem there which the government needs to solve?
See, I think from a larger standpoint, I'll share something with you. When we, I mean, all of us meet with a lot of global heads of businesses who are looking at investing into India. One of the areas that they tell you is that I have, say, 5% of my business in India, but 95% of my tax disputes come from India. And when you try and defend that, the only positive you hear is, assuming they have establishment also in Brazil, they'll tell you, oh, Brazil is worse than you. So I think while, if you met these people 10 years back, they would tell you corporate tax rates are high and this issue existed. So we fixed for issue number 1. We're not able to fix issue number 2. And that predominantly happens because, one, the interpretation issue, but that interpretation can happen anywhere in any country. How to solve it is advanced redressal mechanism, which means these people can come in, put their issue in advance and get a ruling upfront. There are mechanisms not working. We all know, all of us sitting here will tell you that our advanced rulings for companies are pending for 7 years. Advanced ruling pending for 7 years. So think of litigation which happens later on, which is pending for 20 years. So I think that is one area, if this government addresses going forward, which is somehow cleans up what has happened in the past, you can't change it, but really brings in robust mechanisms where you don't audit companies every time. You just say, okay, I think there is problem with this company, and we will look at you every year.
Let me throw up one. So let's say, right now, the government and the agencies are in a position in which they can dig up your tax records dating back to 10 years plus.
Yes.
Is there a case where there can be limitation by time?
There is limitation by time. All I'm saying is that there are cases now pending in high courts and Supreme Courts. Now, one thing is to clean them off and also ensuring that not many cases reach those levels in the future, because that really disturbs the foreign investors when they look at that status and say, we don't know what we're getting into.
Okay. Hemal, let's look at the other critical area, which I think needs to be addressed and needs to be put on the table. The income which is being generated from the agriculture sector. It remains a political hot potato. What do you think needs to be done to clean up the scenario there?
Yeah, you also referred that earlier we have not seen any political party having this brute force. So probably post the election, the one thing that can be touched upon is to how do we address and look with the help of state, because remember, income tax is a state under the constitution, it's a state subject, it's concurrent list. So how does the central government work with the state government, like what we have done in GST, and propose to, let's say, tax the super rich farmers, or rich farmers, say farmers having income more than 15 lakhs, because you don't want to touch the farmers who are just kind of scraping, but that will help us in terms of getting the percentage what you refer to. Today, only 2.2% of the population is paying income tax. You cannot keep on, how much are you going to extract from this same set of people? So the only way to widen the tax net is probably look at agriculture, and as I said, probably look at just the elite ones, not the lower end of the strata, but look at the elite ones, and probably this government, once it comes in, along with the state government, should really actively look at it.
Naveen, in conclusion, if you look at the trajectory of the government, it's very clear to us that there is greater focus on digitalization, right? The entire framework of the economy is being changed. As we look into the future, and I go back to this July declaration, is there a scope, is there space where you feel that greater emphasis on digitization of the economy can actually lead to greater disruptions, maybe to begin with in the tax structure, but simplicity, ease? Are we moving in the right direction on the simplicity and ease business as far as taxation is concerned?
So as far as the small taxpayers, I think we have reached to that level wherein the tax compliances are pretty easy. So you take the example of ITR 1 or ITR 4. So it's pre-populated with all the required financial data. But when it comes to business transactions, ITR 2 or ITR 3 we talk about, or ITR 5 for the firms, or ITR 6 for the companies, it's still very difficult, and I would say there is still long way to go. Because of the complexity of the businesses, the ITR 6 has become so complicated even though for the small businesses. For the MSME, it becomes very difficult to do all the compliances. So I see there is a lot of scope in using the digitization to simplify the tax compliances, specifically when we have got around 6.1 million MSMEs in India, and to bring them to the formal economy. the government should really focus on simplifying the compliance process so that it becomes easy for the businesses to comply with the laws. And I think that could be possible with digitization.
All right. Yeah,
Just to add, I think digitization, I think we need to take it as given, Bhupendra. I think the question is, if you look 5 years from now, that is the use of something like Gen AI, that how that is going to be used, not only for your interaction, but for example, Gaurav referred to litigation, but let's say, can you use Gen AI to predict a score? If I get into a litigation, what are my chances of winning? Gen AI can actually use the past precedent host of data and tell you, oh, you have a 60% chances of winning. That can help you whether to get into it or not. That will also help you reduce. So use of Gen AI is going to be transformational as I see it.
All right, gentlemen, great pleasure to have had you here today on this panel. Only thing I can say that, you were talking about a chartered accountant. I remember having a chat with my CA, and he says, Chaubey Saab, if you get to know everything, what will we do? So that's the nature of the game. But thanks a lot to all of you for joining us.
That was a really insightful first panel. Thank you so much. So many learnings and takeaways for all of us. And now it is time for us to move on to the second panel of today. Fueling Growth, Strategies for Economic Revitalization. Now, delving into the dynamic strategies outlined in the Union Budget 2024 aimed at fostering economic growth, exploring innovative approaches, industry perspectives, and actionable strategies designed to propel economic revitalization. For this, may we have on stage Naveen Raheja, Chairman and Managing Director, Raheja Developers Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Naveen Raheja. Mr. Madhukar Gupta, former Additional Secretary, Department of Public Enterprises, Ministry of Heavy Industries, and State Election Commissioner of Rajasthan. And Urvashi Prasad, Director, Niti Aayog. Once again, I would like to call on stage senior journalist Mr. Bhupen Chaubey to moderate the session.
Okay, let's carry forward with the spirit of our first panel, where we're trying to find out exactly how do we look at the future. Because I think what this budget has done is it's very clearly pointed us in a direction that whatever had been achieved over, let's say, over the last 10 years has been achieved. And now we need to start looking at building blocks for the future. What do we expect? What do we gain in the next 5 years? And therefore, strategies for economic revitalization. And I don't think we could have had a more eclectic panel than Naveen Bhai, Chairman and Managing Director from Raheja Developers, here on the stage with us, Madhukarji, a well-known ace bureaucrat, and our very dear friend Urvashi Prasad, Director Niti Aayog. So let me begin with you, Madhukarji. You've had stints here at the center, you're now in Rajasthan. As far as economic engines performing at their optimum is concerned, where do you think is the India story today?
Well, while studying in other countries, usually when they used to talk, economists, when they used to talk about India, they used to talk about the Hindu rate of growth. The story has slowly changed, but we are yet not there. If we have to become a 5 trillion economy by 2030, we need to grow at a higher rate than the present rate of growth, which is 7.6%. Also, we were talking about technology. Technology is only a means to an end. Whether I reach the destination by traveling in a bullock cart or in a jet or in a Maruti, as long as I reach the destination, I'm fine. Whether my food has been cooked on a microwave or on a traditional cooking stove, a traditional cooking stove might be able to cook better food. You might have seen advertisements saying chulhe pe bana hua khana. So technology also cuts both ways. What I read from senior economists was increase the size of the cake. We also have affirmative action in our country, also in the US, So they were having a tough time dividing the cake. Finally, they realized, increase the size of the cake. And once the volume of your budget, once the volume of economic activity in a country goes up, other things can kick in later, like technology, IT, who gets what. The basic issue is look at the 70 big picture. So as long as we increase this volume of the economy, other things will take care of themselves.
But Naveen, who better than you to, sorry, Madhukarji, than you to answer this question, and then I'll come to you, Naveen bhai. In 2014, when Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister, the one adage which was often used was that it's not the government's job to be in business. It's the government's job to facilitate a certain business environment ecosystem. As we now move further, into this Amrit Kal, where do you think how are we holding up on that front? Is the government still in business, getting out of business? How's that story adding up?
We've been listening. I've been working with governments for the last 39, 40 years. It depends in which scenario, in which country we're living. In still a developing country like India, can we do away with government hospitals? Can we do away with the mother dairy? Today, you take away mother dairy from Delhi. What happens? Even hotels, all state hotel corporations, they basically are there to stabilize prices. Something which works in the US or in a developed economy may not work in a country like India. The ecosystem, the ecosystem is very, very different.
So you need some government.
I'll give you more examples. Take away DTC from here. Today, how many poor people travel in the metro rail in Delhi? From 13 rupees, the price was increased to 28 rupees, the minimum price. I don't know why. But then people who could have traveled by metro rail had to take to buses. Even railways, we ferry people at the cheapest price in the world as far as railways are concerned. So when we shift gears, we need to be mindful of what was good in our country. So we should not, and whatever change happens, we should be very clear. Just like a good surgeon or a good doctor, we should be very clear. Whatever change we are making, it will have this desired effect.
Okay. Let me turn my attention to you, Naveen. You represent a sector which has been much maligned, the real estate sector, but remains an integral part of our economy. I'm trying to understand the future context. From a real estate standpoint, what do you anticipate the next 5 to 10 years are really going to look like?
Despite being maligned, let me tell you, real estate is actually the driver of the economy. If the real estate moves, the economy moves. Anyways, I'll take it forward from Mr. Madhukar Gupta only. And without going through, or if you want, I can repeat the figures what we got in the interim budget.
Sure. I mean, just give us a big picture. The purpose behind this exercise is to give viewers a big picture of what do we expect in the next 5 to 10 years.
In the next 5 years. So what we got currently is that the outlay increased from 54,103 crores to 80,671 crores for the government to launch housing for PMAY, for urban poor, for middle class also, the new segment which is being targeted now. Out of which, that 32,000 was for rural, 22,103 was for urban. So as we look at it, I can say that if the Niti Aayog or some government rationalization and of understanding about the country and about the growth is represented to our Honorable Prime Minister and to our Honorable Finance Minister and to the concerned officers, there is a lot to do. There is lot to focus and lot to do. Madhukarji mentioned about to commit to 5 trillion economy, you need to do much more.
So, but give us some examples.
So I will give.
From your sector,
हाँ.
what do you think are the interventions, the changes which are required?
I will say that we are talking about a budget figures of 54,000 crores going to 80,000 crores. And coming back to the maligned sector, can somebody imagine how much is the money stuck of the customers in incomplete projects across India? Anybody can guess this? You can't guess. Anybody can guess? No, it is much more than that. It's more than that.
More than 5 lakh crore also.
So we are talking about complete budget outlay of 54,000 increasing by 49%, going to 80,000 crores. And at the same time, we have already stuck investment. This investment is of the people of India, or my own country.
Of what volume?
My own country.
Yeah, but you were giving us
And
the
look
volume.
at the volume. You know, more than 450,000 units across the country are stuck up. Since they had been for last 10 years, they were stuck up.
So that would add to how much money potentially?
Maybe around 5 lakh.
5 lakh crores. Okay, so your number was right. Chaliye, good.
So we,
But that's
you
the
know,
point.
If we look at these figures, just imagine an increase of maybe 49% or a few thousand crores. I think it comes to about 26,000 crores against 20x. Which money is there? How people are suffering. Developers, you know, we have seen 95% good developers who had worked for over 30 years for their lifetime going to jails. So there had been certain issues which had to be actually taken care of. Ups and downs in business do come. Mistakes we human beings make. Over speculation can happen. The market was running, so this country is having a very, you know, it is the largest populated country on the globe. So, and it is growing fastest also on the globe. So naturally the optimism has to be there, and the optimism leads to investments.
Okay.
Now,
Go ahead, please.
if I can. So I will not end up here. I would like to give the solution also. Because I've talked about the volume of the problem. Now what is the solution to this? I think the first thing should be the last mile funding, which is hardly about this much only. And this last mile funding should go. Now we have RERA in place. RERA in every state understands that which project is stuck up because of which reason. So take customers on board, take developer on board, take, you know, the bankers on board, and complete the projects. There should be some special outlay given to RERAs across India because they understand the problem. Sending the developers to jail is not the solution. It cannot take out that money. What it will do, that customers will lose money. This incomplete projects will fall in the hands of global funds, NBFCs, very cheap. And again, this money actually, which is to be used by my own country for my own growth, goes out.
But it's not so easy, Rajayji, because, you know...
It will take a lot of time.
Yeah, we've seen...
We have not seen projects getting completed.
No, I agree, but then what can be a cogent way forward? Because you be lenient on the developer, you find that there is lack of transparency. I mean, I live in Noida. I know so many cases where people have bought flats, bought houses, which can't be registered. Why? Because there is some dispute between the authority and the real estate developer. Now, do you think we've set up RERA, right? I mean, I'd like to believe that the laws have become far more stringent when it comes to demanding transparency. But as far as protecting the interests and rights of the consumer is concerned, where are we on that trajectory?
We recently had a Amitabh Kant committee. It happened to talk to the authorities, to RERA, and they have come out with actually they have addressed this. But to actually implement it, I think there needs to be a wider platform of participation, brainstorming, and actual implementation, that how to complete these all projects and deliver to customers.
Okay.
Not that the developer was accused, so he cannot be bailed out. Ultimately, they are the people who know that how the project, they had the dream, they had the path to complete the project. But due to certain maybe reasons, there was many reasons they can be assigned to that, but they got stuck. But does it mean that they should remain stuck?
Agreed. Well, we'll have Amitabh Kant actually in some time from now, and maybe we can ask him this question. But Urvashi, let me come to you. You know, Niti Aayog plays a very fundamental role today in policy formulation. As we move, as I said, as we move deeper into Amrit Kal, what are the specific challenges which may have been identified, say, by Niti Aayog over the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I think there's a few, and I think the budget also tried to touch upon some of these. So as you said, you know, we're working on this Viksit Bharat 2047 and working with states to develop the roadmaps because each state will need to have its own roadmap. I mean, each state in India is too different for us to just, you know, have a plan at the national level. So I think one of the major challenges that, you know, we obviously need to address are the inequities that still exist between different states. We've made a lot of progress in the last few years in terms of providing access to basic services, you know, near universalization of a lot of services, whether it's sanitation or now the push on drinking water, health insurance, etc. But there's obviously a lot of gaps that remain in terms of inequities, regional inequities, you know, rural and urban inequities, and some setbacks that the pandemic, you know, obviously gave us. So I think addressing those inequities, disparities between states is one very big issue, one very big challenge. The other is in terms of how we are going to move forward to 2047. We can have a path, you know, like China, but we have said that we'll have a path which is much more sustainable. So we're also trying to, at the same time, go through this energy transition or the green transition. And that actually puts a lot of challenges because on the one hand, you're asking states, you know, to develop. On the other hand, we're also trying to tell them to do it sustainably. So that is something that we're also trying to see how do we manage that path wherein we reach the economic goals, we reach our social goals, our development goals, but we do it in a sustainable manner.
What about fitness, mental health? You know, there has been a lot of focus. Every time I meet senior ministers in the government, I find that the Prime Minister himself is very focused. That as one of the reasons why you've called this Amrit Kal is because you want the country to be healthier, you know, more in shape. Is mental health a critical area of significance today? Let's say for Niti Aayog?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, the whole public and primary health space is what we've been really trying to focus on because our health system, as many of you would know, has been historically a very cure-focused, a very hospital-based health system. And we really need to shift that to preventive and public health. And mental health is a very key part of that. The pandemic, I think, really opened up a lot of discourse on mental health, but certainly in the policy space as well. We are really trying to strengthen our mental health programs, look at them from different dimensions. You know, women have different kinds of issues, the elderly have different kinds of, you know, mental health issues. So we're also trying to segment it that way and, you know, come up with programs accordingly.
Okay. Madhukarji, as a bureaucrat, and now you're looking at the Election Commission as well, tell me, in the state of Rajasthan, tell me, as civil servants, what is the change you anticipate? You know, if everything is digital around us and everything is becoming more digital around us, from a policy making or a policy implementation standpoint, what do you think are critical challenges which need to be addressed as a civil servant?
It's always the man. It's always the man behind the machine who's important, not the machine. How you use the machine is dependent on the man. 1965. Pakistan had saber jets. We had antiquated planes. No, in 65 they had 65 Sabre jets, 71 patent tanks. But the culture in our army, in our armed forces was very different from the culture in the Pakistan forces. You cannot discount man. You cannot discount leadership. You know, we can run a numbers game. It's all about leadership, big thinking. Coming back again to the housing sector, imagine 1930s, the slogan in the US, American dream, give everyone a house. The basic idea was not to give houses only, but to grow the economy at a very fast pace. Singapore, 61 or 62, Singapore became independent. And the focus was again housing. So what will be the drive? Clarity about economics. What is it that you want to do? As I said earlier, it doesn't matter how much technology you use. We can't go overboard with technology. You know, as I said, cooking, whether I use a microwave or I use traditional cooking, doesn't matter.
Okay, rarely do I come across a bureaucrat these days who says, well, let's look at the man behind the machine and not the machine, but you obviously belong to that task. But great pleasure to have all the three of you here on stage. Thanks to all of you for throwing some light in terms of what's to be expected in future.
Thank you so much. A lovely panel indeed. And I'm sure a lot of us will agree it is the man behind the machinery who's making it work. Now, moving on, join us for an engaging fireside chat on budget planning for businesses with Mr. Gurcharan Das, an accomplished author and former CEO of P&G India. Now, gain valuable insights into effective budget planning for businesses in today's dynamic landscape, and get ready for a conversation that promises to be both enlightening and practical at the same time.
Okay, always a pleasure speaking to you, Gurcharan. Good to be in conversation again, seeing you after a long time. Well, I see that people are still trickling in. So let's, just to warm up the audiences here, I've looked at the story of the budget and the story of the economy through two specific lenses in terms of what has happened in this budget, in terms of taxation, and with Mr. Raheja, we've delved into the real estate spaces. But let me ask you a focused question which could have, maybe according to you, a broader answer to, where are we as an economy? Are we a more resilient and a strong economy today?
You know, if we measure from 1991, that's the only place to measure. But the first 40 years was I don't want to use bad words, but it was a disaster. So since 1991 to today, we have grown at almost 7%, 6.88 or something like that. Now, for a democracy, that's damn good. It's almost never been done for a democracy to have done something like this. But, we haven't created the jobs that a 7% growth should have created. And why? Because our model was wrong.
Model was wrong.
Model was wrong.
So we attained the percentile-based growth.
Yes. And what was wrong? That we have skipped the Industrial Revolution. We have not had, every country has done it in one way. These people are talking up front. Can we ask them to...
yeah, if we could just maintain silence, please.
No, it's these two people right there,
Please, sorry.
I'm sorry, but it's very hard for me to concentrate when you're right in front. All right, I'll maybe look that way. Okay, I'm so sorry.
No worries.
But we have not yet created an industrial revolution. So how are we going to take people 45% of Indians are on the farm. And that's way surplus from what we need. And manufacturing accounts for only 16% of GDP. It should be, for our stage of development, should be double.
But, Mr. Das, isn't it true? We've heard so much, and so many attempts have been made to take people away from the farm, bring them to the cities.
Yeah.
You're saying that it's not working?
No, I mean, otherwise, all our competitors have over 30% market of their GDP coming from manufacturing. And the other cause of this disease is the fact that all countries in recent times who created an industrial revolution, who transformed themselves, they did it through the export of labor-intensive manufactures. Right from Japan after the war, Korea, Taiwan, and the latest is China. Now, our exports of manufactured goods is less than 2%, of world trade of manufacturers, of the world exports. So we have failed. We have failed. Let's admit it. And I'm not blaming any particular government, because this is a problem that started from 91. And today, we are in a much better condition than we were in 91. In other words, our infrastructure has vastly improved. Our road mileage has doubled since 2011. Our port handling capacity has quadrupled since 2011. We've had a digital revolution that's taken away a lot of the friction out of the system. In fact, the low-end corruption that used to bedevil our performance as a manufacturing country was the corruption at that level. Now, because it's digital, you don't have that as since GST, we are one country. So we don't have to have check nakas, we don't have to have, a depot in every state, which we used to have.
Is a fundamental problem, Mr. Das, according to you, that, we're looking at 1991, let's say, as a reference point. Are there more centers of industrial experience in India or not? Or have we still got stuck?
No, there are. There are certain areas where we are a real player. Automobiles. India is the hub of the small car. Then in pharmaceuticals, there are certain pharmaceuticals we are humming along. But that's not enough. It's not enough. What I don't understand is that, if you take it, that now the opposition has been out of power for 10 years. But I haven't heard from any opposition leader this problem. This is the problem of our country. And neither from the government, 2014, Mr. Modi, Vikas, this is what he promised. Vikas was a code word for better formal jobs in our country.
So we got the infrastructure. Uttar Pradesh, which is in terms of size, the sixth largest country in the world, today wants to reposition itself as the Pradesh of expressways, right? Every state in this country has some event where they want to invite, foreign investors. Still, somewhere the job question has not been settled. Is that the fundamental reason why you say there has been no industrial revolution?
No, I think the mindset is not yet changed. I'm sorry, we have some very distinguished bureaucrats here. But in 91, the bureaucracy should have been sent to school to study Economics 1. And they were a command economy bureaucracy. And they had, you have to learn that it is the private sector that will create the jobs, not the government. And a lot of, just the other day, I asked somebody, I won't name anybody, but I asked them, look, it's good news that this big company has come into India. And what did you do to get this company to come? He said, I gave them permission. Now that's still the mindset that we are high and
I'm the
mighty.
Maibab. The Maibab.
No, I give you permission. Whereas, what does Vietnam do? They go to individual target companies. Now we've got Apple. Now that's a very good thing. But like Apple, there are a dozen other trigger companies that, you see, this is a good time because also from China, there's disillusionment. So companies are looking to come out. But what are we doing in terms of, we should have been sending delegations of spies to Vietnam, Mexico, Indonesia.
To understand.
To understand how they're taking away our lunch. This investment should come to India. Why is it going to Vietnam? And that's the point. We have given permission.
We own the land, we'll give you electricity, we'll give you tax holidays. Essentially, any state chief minister or any state level bureaucrat that I speak to always tells me, boss, you get me investments, I'll give you free electricity, free land, and I'll give you tax holiday. This is the nature of, let's say, growth. You don't agree with that?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. That's good. But all I'm trying to say now is, I mean, I won't talk about an embarrassing thing that happened with this laptop thing. I mean, okay, so it was a mistake. The government made a mistake.
Can happen.
They shouldn't have used they shouldn't have done what they did. But they corrected themselves. So it'll be all right. We'll become a manufacturing powerhouse for laptops and iPads and so on. What I'm trying to say is that we still need to do reforms, whoever comes to power in 2024. The 3 reforms that got stuck in the last regime, land, labor, and the farm laws. They still need to be done, and there are others. But you know what else we need? We need to tell people how the reforms work for the people. People still think that the market or the reforms makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. People cannot distinguish between being pro-market and pro-government. They mistake that. And so, Margaret Thatcher and even Dung, Margaret Thatcher used to say, I spend 20% of my time doing the reforms and 80% selling them. And so, I once asked Mr. Modi. He had invited a few of us who write on economic issues. Nainan was there, Swaminathan Iyer was there, and so on. And this was just at the end of his first year in office, 2015. And it was a very fresh, he was saying, now tell me, what do you think I should be doing? Now that's wonderful. And so one of the things I said is, you have to sell the market. I said the market, Adam Smith called it an invisible hand. So it's invisible. So we have to make the invisible visible. Because it's hard to understand that millions of people in the world, in the country, making money for themselves, ultimately lead to the benefit of raising the whole society. It's not easy. So therefore, I said all this, and he said, okay, we'll do it in Man Ki Baat. And so he said, give me a one-pager. And so I sent him a one-pager. And I think he did devote a little time. But you need to do it relentlessly. You can't be doing reforms chupke by stealth. I mean, India can't be just growing at night when the government sleeps.
Well, because, the Margaret Thatcher quote that you're giving, I thought if ever there was a government or if ever there was a leader, who had the ability to market what he was doing at astronomically high level, this was a leader.
Yes.
And still it's not working.
And so I think, I think the government came with very good intentions, and they have done reforms. The GST, the foreign, the tax rate, etc. I could name a few more. But the job would be, you're absolutely right. We have a leader in place who's the best communicator in the world.
Yeah, he's
Now,
potentially.
all he has to do is what Deng did in China and what Margaret Thatcher did in the UK. Sell the reforms, sell the market. Tell people how this helps them in their lives. And that reforms don't make the rich richer, they lift everybody.
Okay, let me ask you to throw some light on another sector. It's something which is being spoken about extensively these days, the startup sector, right? Some of the leading lights of the startup sector, we're now seeing, whether it's Vijay Shekhar Sharma of Paytm or Byju's, we're now seeing them struggle with various issues. What, if I was to ask you, Mr. Das, to put your finger, what is it that's still ailing the corporate sector? Is it governance, compliance? I mean, Vijay Shekhar Sharma the other day says that he's now going to be a compliance first and a technology second company. I don't know how to look at this. I don't know how to respond to this.
Well, let me first say that the startups, this is the age of startups, and we should applaud the country for having achieved, what, 100+ unicorns. And there was a study done by a professor at MIT in the 1980s, where he studied the record of the American economy over 25, 30 years. And he discovered, he divided the economy into 3 types of companies. They were the mom and pop stores, you know, the kirana wala, the pan wala, and all that. He called them mice. Then there were the giant companies, Exxon and the large enterprises. He called them elephants. And then there were the startups, and he called them gazelles. So he showed in his study that 85% of the jobs in the American economy is created by a startup that moves fast, like a gazelle. It moves up, like becomes a unicorn. They create all the jobs.
That's an interesting statistic. 80% of jobs
80%.
in a country like America were created by
So in other words,
startups.
at that time, the new sectors, the gazelles, were the DHL and the FedEx, these guys, you know. And so I think the best news for our country, frankly, and I think it's terrific that the government applauds this thing that's happening. And you asked, so that's good news. But on the other side, you know, everyone I talk to says we are still a compliance-burdened economy. That's the word. Over-regulated. Now, this is what I meant, that the bureaucracy should have been sent to school when we were doing the economic reforms. And I think they made some efforts. But it needs to be a much stronger brainwashing.
Do you think, if I was to put a political lens there, and if I was to say that the problem with economic managers in our country still is this, that we're still trying to formulate policies which will first and foremost look at the interests of the 60% or 70% of the poor and downtrodden. And therefore the skew in policy making is still dealing with, let's say, povertarian economics,
right?
Rather than maybe completely growth-based economics.
But so therefore, I mean, and in a poor country, it's right. But where the selling job comes is to show people that the only dignified way to help the poor is not to give them money for tomorrow. It is to create jobs. The only form of dignity out of poverty is jobs. And for that, you need investment. I mean, I'm a great fan of Sitharaman because in the last 4 budgets, plus this latest one, there's been a single-minded focus on infrastructure spending, capex. I mean, these are the job creating, and we're doing it in a fiscally responsible manner. That, I hope that spirit will continue, no matter who comes to power.
But Mr. Das, I come from UP myself. I belong to Varanasi, and I spent a lot of my time traveling through the hinterland. And I kid you not, the number of people I now see who are only too happy because government is giving 80 crore families, a certain amount of free food grain. On the other hand, you say that the challenge is that jobs are not being created. Yeah. Are these two contradictory ideas in some ways?
Well, it's contradictory in terms of timing. Frankly, politics is a 20-20 match, and economy is a 5-day test match. So if a politician comes, say a liberal like me, runs for election, who wants reforms, and I'll tell the people, look, I'll create conditions for investment, and companies will come, they will create jobs, we could improve our schools, so there are people who can fulfill those jobs. And on the other side of me is a politician who says, tomorrow, I will give you electricity free, food free, pani free. Who do you think the voter will vote for? They'll tell me, Arey bhai, by the time that your results come, you won't even be here. But he is giving us tomorrow free food, free electricity. So for a reformer, it's a very tough job. And so, this is why we need that education so that people do understand. Yes, I think it's a great thing that we have fed 800 million people during COVID. But right now, if you ask me, 80% of India is not poor. Or 70%, 800
See, it's
million.
like riding a tiger. Once you have gone at a certain level, now you can't come down. Because the moment you come down, you'll then be accused, oh, you've deprived X number of people, the right to food. You'd remember, sir, in the Dravidian territories, DMK, AIA-DMK initially started off with free mixies and television sets and whatnot. And now all that has been replaced by, food. Yeah. So every state, every government wants to give something free. If the focus is going to be on freebies, how will the focus then shift to creating jobs and maybe building a more equitable form of...
So this is Mr. Modi's job. He has to...
what I'm highlighting.
So he has to actually, ultimately, he's got the popularity to be able to do this. And and frankly, country after country, there have been people who've had to do this thing,
Okay.
Clinton did it in America. Yeah. And so you need that, But all I'm saying is the conditions are now good.
So the condition is good, the ground rule is right.
Preconditions, we are just right for the takeoff.
Okay.
And frankly, to achieve that 2047 objective that Mr. Modi has laid out, we will need to grow at 8, not at 7.
All right, Gurcharan, always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming today. Great fun.
A big thank you to Mr. Gurcharan Das for sharing his expertise on budget planning. And as he pointed out, all good things take time. So I believe it is only going to get better with time. Let's now head into our next panel for today, unraveling the specific implications of Union Budget 2024 on the automotive sector, exploring transformative trends, investment opportunities, and strategies for navigating change. Calling on stage our panelists to kickstart the session, Shashank Srivastav, Executive Director at Maruti Suzuki India Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, please put a hand together for Mr. Shashank Srivastav. Mr. Mayank Jain, CEO, New Auto Car Deco. Vinkesh Gulati, Chairman, Research and Academy, Federation of Automobile Dealers Association. And Mr. Amin Lakhani, CEO of Mindshare. Let me once again invite Bhupendra Chaubey to please come and moderate the session.
Okay, one of the things which I enjoy, in partnership with Times of India and what Prasad's team does very well is that they always lay out the key talking points very clearly in a small and focused session like this with the key stakeholders. So it gives you a lot of insights to those of you here or are watching this broadcast on the online platforms of the Times Group. It's a fantastic opportunity, to enrich yourself, to inform yourself, and I think somewhere that's the whole purpose behind doing these events. So let's look at the other critical sector now of our economy, the automobile sector. It's now amongst the biggest performing, the best performing sectors of the world. Just look around yourself. There is so much of innovation which is happening. We're talking of EV cars, we're talking of hybrid vehicles, we're talking of trucks moving now on more energy efficient fuels. So lots to look forward to. Vinkesh, let me start with you straight up. In your capacity, of being associated with the Federation of Automobile Dealers Association as well for so long, and you're an individual entrepreneur on your own as well. What is the story of the automobile sector, not till now? What do you anticipate this sector will look like, let's say, over the next 5 to 7 years?
So thanks, Vipin. A very pertinent question, and frankly, we dealers today are expanding like how? Just expecting that the coming 5 years is really wonders. I expect Shashankji will agree to this, but see, we have seen the auto industry normally, or I'll say specifically to the car or two-wheeler, whatever, it sees a 5-6 years of good time and then 1 or 2. That's a cycle what we have been seeing for the past around 20 years. This time COVID happened, last time some other thing happened. Something happens where we get a 2 or 3 period. But for the past 2-3 years, we are on the ride. I'll say we are on a fly mode, not even driving. We are on a fly mode, and we, as per the numbers, as per the expectation, as per the economy which is growing, we feel ki in the coming at least for 5 years, what you are asking, year on year, we will be regularly growing. The expectation is different with different category. It could be starting from 5% CAGR to 8 to 10% CAGR. But overall, this is the industry today. No doubt I heard real estate is more important, but I feel overall, as per me, being from the auto side, I feel whenever it's correlational. If India grows, auto grows. If auto grows, India grows. So you can think, because if economy increases, economy is in a better position, you have disposable income.
Gurjaran Das was talking about a very interesting subject, and I remember you once told me about the number of jobs that you all create.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Now, if your sector is growing, I'd like to believe that the number of jobs which is being created by your sector will also grow commensurately.
And I'll tell you what, frankly, we are not like industries where we displace manpower to come to a sector where the industries are. We dealerships are today at every nook and corner. Every tehsil you will find at least 5-10 dealerships there. And we don't displace people. We place them there only. And practically we are the training centers also, because you must have heard that Guru Chela Shishya system, people coming in, ki wo pehle hathodi leke chalaye and dhire dhire vehicle banana seekhe. That we have done through for the past 40-50 years. So on that side, and I feel the biggest organized manpower market is the dealerships. We do some 5 million manpower, which is in an organized state. There would be more also. I'm not saying real estate could be double also. But this is pure organized market where all the dealers work through a process and they have all people around them.
Aman, let me come to you, Aman. As a CEO of Mindshare, what is the story of, say, innovation, technology in the auto sector? How's that story shaping up?
So, firstly, it's Amin.
Amin, sorry, my apologies. Okay.
And I thought there was some Aman here, right? So let's look at it from a consumer perspective, right? What we are seeing is that given the digital proliferation and the participation of consumer online, there's significant amount of time spent on discovery. People say that, search online and buy offline is the way we are defining, one of the sectors, which is automobile. And you can argue in favor of the fact that this consumer is slightly more evolved than the regular consumer. And therefore, he's looking at technology, he's looking at features, he's looking at innovation, he's looking at what is happening around the world. And he's also looking at all the auto influencers that are talking about, And therefore, there is a cycle of demand generation. So if I start my search with, say, for example, at 100 level of buying a car, I'm sure that by the time my research ends, I'm already got upgraded because I want the next best feature, I want the next best car, I want to see the affordability, I want to see the financial packages. And when all of this happens, there is a lot of awareness that happens. Now, this slightly evolved consumer is also driving many other things. What is he driving? This slightly evolved consumer is also mindful and responsible and is looking at sustainable options. And therefore, sustainability conversation has become so much important in this category. Therefore, the fact that if I were to buy my next car, how can I also become responsible to the environment? And therefore, it's also fueling, the alternative fuel, car consumption conversation.
But is it, on the economic front, the question of pricing versus sustainability, is it true that still, the gap which exists is still too huge?
Yes, it is huge, but so is for any innovation, right? Till you achieve scale, till you achieve threshold level, that point in time, people will have to pay up that kind of thing more. And I'm sure there are much bigger experts sitting over here who can kind of argue in favor or against that. But to my mind, it is initial years, and there will always be trendsetters who will be coming over there and putting up a premium and being the first movers in the category and buying those, that product or that category in initial stages.
Shashank, as someone who represents, one of the oldest auto manufacturers, car manufacturers in the country, let's take the sustainability conversation forward. How are you sort of repackaging, re-evolving yourself when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, I think the sustainability the thing in automobile will be driven not only by consumer preferences, as was mentioned by Amin, but also by government policies. And it's basically a realization that as far as environment is concerned, we need to have much lower emissions. And that is why our government has also specified very strict emission norms, which means the choice of technology would increasingly be for OEMs towards more sustainable powertrains. However, here is the point. As far as tailpipe emission is concerned, EV seems to be the best option. And there seems to be a consensus in the industry that EVs will be the long-term future. However, where the consensus is not there is when. So the question is not whether, the question is when. And for when, I think the projections currently for the auto industry in India is that it would be around that 20% mark by 2030. Right now it is at 2.1%. And in the intervening period, of course, you would like to have more fuel efficient vehicles because you have to reduce emissions in any case. And here comes the alternate fuels. You have options of hybrid, you have plug-ins, you have CBG, you have flex fuel, you have CNG, and so on and so forth. So the technology will coexist, all these powertrains, till the time that one of the technologies become much more. And one reason why EVs haven't really taken off is not just because cost of acquisition is higher, as you rightly pointed out, and I think it happens till you reach a scale, but also because, and that has happened because the localization of battery has to happen. And the government has taken many steps to make sure that there is an encouragement of our OEMs to put money and investment behind localization of battery and its components. Suzuki has invested 10,000 crore plus. And that should bring the cost of acquisition down. And of course, in this budget, you saw how the finance minister said that there will be a big support for charging infrastructure, which is also very important because that is one of the things which works on the mind of consumers. Preventing him from wholeheartedly embracing the EV technology is that range anxiety that he has. And of course, technology changes and will influence not just the powertrain, but actually everything. So where you have work going in autonomous cars, you have work going in connected cars. Connectivity is possible because you have higher cadence networks, cloud, you have quantum computing, so you can do many more things. You have shared mobility, the type of ownership itself is changing. You have fractional ownership, you have shared mobility, you have P2P, you have ride hailing, and you would see mobility emerging as a service rather than as a product. And the development of those rapid transportation hubs, which will mean that you will see a whole change in the type of products which are sold in the auto industry.
Okay, let me also extend a warm welcome to the G20 Sherpa, Mr. Amitabh Kant, who's just joined us, and he'll be in a conversation with us in just a few minutes from now. But Mayank, let me come to you. I was seeing a tweet from Elon Musk, just a few days back, where he was talking about his excitement about India. Now there's Tesla, and I understand if Tesla was to come to India, it'll be costing around, let's say, anywhere between 40 to 50 lakhs. Which would be the price variant for a lot of cars, from Toyota to Honda to whatever, I mean, several brands. Do you foresee, if there is greater disposable income which is available in India, in the next 5 to 10 years, are we going to see more international brands coming into India, or do you think Maruti and Honda, which is almost Indian, or or a lot of these other, which have gone into various JVs, is that story going to continue now?
Well, it's interesting. Over the last few years, we've actually seen a couple of OEMs leave India rather than enter India.
Is there a specific reason you want to, just for the benefit of our audiences,
I think
put a finger there?
I think there are myriad reasons. I think it's their own, how they were doing in their own sort of domestic markets in US. A lot of American OEMs over the last few years had actually moved out of India. Ford being the latest one, which moved out about a couple of years back. But I think that trend may well reverse. And I think, Elon Musk's interest in the Indian market is not surprising, given the scale at which India today is. We are today the third largest automobile market in the world. And it would be to those companies' disadvantage if they were not in India. Now, certainly, if they come to India, they are not going to find the going easy. Indian consumers are very, very discerning, and we have a thriving automobile industry today. There are both international OEMs as well as Indian OEMs who offer fantastic products at very competitive prices today in India. But I think more competition is always healthy. But if you talk about the disposable income of Indian consumers, I think we've already seen a shift towards premiumization. When you talk about the products that Indians buy today, for a very long time, Indian consumers were very cost conscious. And then the Indian consumer started becoming aspirational as the economy started to grow. Well, post-COVID, the phenomena that we've been seeing is actually a move towards premiumization, where consumers actually prefer buying the more expensive variant, the more fully loaded variant, rather than the cheaper variant.
Because of the disruptions and the innovations in the car financing schemes also, no? Now you have all these lease rental plans. You want to go and buy a car which costs 1 crore. You pay 8-10 lakh rupees down payment, pay an EMI for 5-7 years of 1 lakh or something. There are bullet payments and all kinds of new schemes, which I find did not exist maybe 4 to 5 years back. So is that one of the fundamental reasons for the growth in the premium car segment?
Certainly, it is. I think also today the Indian consumer is spoiled for choice. So if you look at and Indian consumers sort of want bigger cars these days. I think if we do a straw poll or a show of hands, you'll find that at least half of the audience sitting here drive SUVs. And actually, in not too distant future, that number may well become nearly 70%.
70%?
Yeah, because the digital signals that we see today across all our websites, across all our apps, we see that actually 7 out of 10 buyers in India.
Shashank, you may be the right person to answer this question. On one hand, we're becoming a country of expressways. Nitin Gadkari was telling me the other day that, this Delhi to Bombay journey, which he says is 12 hours, I haven't undertaken that journey, but I'm assuming even if it's 14 hours, let's say, 1400 kilometers, 14 hours. Delhi to Lucknow, 500 kilometer expressway driving, 5.5 to 6 hours. When a customer is coming to you, what is he looking for? He's looking for more speed? Is he looking for what? Features, fully loaded car? What is he looking for?
Yeah, actually a mix of all this. We certainly see people's choice for the body shape. Moving towards more SUV, probably because it's got larger ground clearance, you have that road presence, road driving, the position is very, and the flexibility of usage of interior space. Second is we do see longer distances being running, but on an average, the distances remain more or less the same, which is about 33 to 36 kilometer every day. That's on an average. Some people run for 150, 200 also, and others, the vehicles are lying parked. So yes, but I think what he's referring to is that seems to be an aspiration now building in the Indian customer, which is leading to what is called premiumization. Although I must tell you, the jury is still out in the sense that you could see a reversal of fortune for the smaller cars also. In the recent past, the prices in this segment have gone up much more than the income levels of those consumers. And therefore, the affordability factor has come down. That is expected to get better because it depends on how quickly your disposable income grows with respect to the prices. And prices have gone up for many reasons: commodity prices, regulatory stringency, insurance taxes going up, road tax going up, and so many things. So it's not clear whether it is the small car is going down or SUV is going up. Certainly 70% seems to be far away. But I think what is happening is the reason for buying is changing, more from functionality to aspiration. It is also changing from simply point A to B to something which reflects your status. And the buyer is getting younger. There are more women buyers now. So the construct of the market itself is changing. And I am not so sure on that SUV front, because if you look at the rural areas, in the rural where we have almost 40% of the sale, in the industry about 32%, the SUV is still about 19-20% of the total market. So we are still far away. Of course, we are sitting in an urban area in central Delhi, so a show of hand might actually reveal 100% wanting SUVs, but that may not be a reflective audience, and we could just see that the other part of our country, the Bharat, not just the India, this can be making choices which are quite
Okay,
different.
quick final question to you. I mean, this budget, I saw a unique thing on more, and we're all beneficiaries, so I'm not complaining. I saw the biggest sponsors on television were all automobile sector companies.
Right.
What does it tell us?
It just tells that we need to get more categories on budget. so that's one, because I feel there's a place for everyone. But yeah, auto category for...
And the story is the auto sector wanting to tell India that, I mean, we're hale, hearty, we're thriving.
125%. 125%.
Okay, Shashanki doesn't agree.
Yeah, always, always.
No, because you need to see, we just mentioned from 4 million we'll go to 6 million in a short time. Obviously, you need to reach more consumers.
Sure.
And this is a great way of reaching consumers. Budget is a high viewed event.
Okay, gentlemen, great pleasure to have had you today for this fantastic discussion. Let's
you.
see how far we go in Amrit Kal of our country as far as the auto sector is concerned.
Thank you once again, gentlemen. The automotive sector's future looks indeed fascinating. Now stay with us as we decode government policies next in our next fireside chat. Join us in an enlightening fireside chat where we unravel the intricacies of government policies post the Union Budget 2024. Featuring none other than Mr. Amitabh Kant, G20 Sherpa, and former CEO of Niti Aayog. The session promises a deep dive into the policies shaping our economic landscape. Mr. Amitabh Kant, let me please request you to join us on stage. Over to you, Bhupendra.
Check. Ah, this one is working. Okay. Not working? Okay, what we'll do is maybe we'll share the mic if it's a problem. Okay. Fine. Cool. Warm welcome, Amitabh ji, to this session today, where we're trying to understand what has really been achieved and how do we decode the challenges of the future. Now, you in your life, sir, your life as a civil servant, you've sort of crossed over into various territories, right? From the architect of, I think, one of the most incredible campaigns of Incredible India to Niti Aayog, and now you're performing your responsibilities as a Sherpa of the G20. You're looking at Brazil as well. Throw some light. Where is India on the world map today? You know, before you came, we've looked at various sectors. We looked at real estate, we looked at technology, and we were looking at what life will look like, let's say, in the next 5 to 7 years. When you meet all these world leaders, what's the story of India according to them?
So firstly, there's a lot of positivity. There's a lot of energy. And I think there's a lot of good feel factor about India. Not merely because we are the 5th largest economy in the world and we are heading to be the 3rd largest economy in the world by 27 end. And if we are able to sustain this on a continuous basis, which is critical to my mind, we should aim to be a $35 trillion economy by the time we become 100 in 2047. That should be our aim. Because our objective should not be merely about the size of the economy, but about raising the per capita income of every Indian. It should be inclusive growth, and this would require India to grow on all cylinders. That means that our services need to continue growing. Our manufacturing must be a bigger part of our GDP. They should be close to about 25 to 27% of our GDP to create jobs. Also, India needs to urbanize rapidly in a very sustained manner. So sustainable urbanization is critical. And lastly, I think our agriculture productivity must grow very rapidly, which means that the huge amount of population, 42% of our population is dependent on agriculture, which must move out of agriculture into manufacturing and urbanization.
You know, before you came, we were in a conversation with Gurcharan Das, and he was very, very clear about this. He said that the real problem is this, and I don't know whether Mr. Das is still around, but his point was that we've not done well as far as the job manufacturing scenario is concerned, job creation scenario is concerned. Your thoughts on that? You've done so much in Niti Aayog and now as a G20 Sherpa. Do you think we've struggled on that front?
We've, the challenge really, Bhupendra, has been that other countries have grown on the back of manufacturing. And manufacturing has created vast jobs. India has grown on the back of services. And India's job creation has been largely in the agriculture sector, which means that we've created poorly paid jobs. And you create good quality jobs when you urbanize sustainably. Just to give you one perspective on this, and that is that if you urbanize in a sustainable manner, if you look at Gautam Budh Nagar, that is Noida and Greater Noida together, its GDP today is 7x higher than the second city of Uttar Pradesh, that is Kanpur. And
but what does it tell you? Is it a cause of concern? Is it not a cause of concern that maybe we're not creating enough centers of excellence, enough centers of industrial growth?
So we are not doing good urbanization in India, and urbanization is what drives growth. In recent times, all countries of the world which have grown, whether it was Korea, whether it was Taiwan, whether it was Singapore, whether it was China, all their GDP has grown not on the back of agriculture. The more resources you put into rural development, the more resources you put into agriculture, which is the obsession with most state governments. All state politicians want to put more and more money on rural development and agriculture. The more they do it, the poorer they'll become. You need to urbanize and create better quality of life for people in urban areas and ensure that we create manufacturing jobs and enhance productivity so that you can give a better quality of life for citizens living in rural areas.
Isn't there a contradiction in what you're saying, sir? Because on one hand, I find that the central government is only too happy to increase the volume of money which is being dedicated, say, to schemes like MNREGS. 80 crore Indians to be given a certain volume of free food grain. Is politics inherently about trying to continue to feed this mechanism, which you say needs to be actually kept away? Is that a challenge?
So I think you need to look at it in totality. What the government of India has done, particularly in its recent budget and in the last 4 to 5 budgets, is if you look at from 2013-14 to now, there's been almost a 600% increase in capex expenditure of the government. It has taken it up from about 1% to 3.4%. So the drive, the growth has been driven by capex expenditure of the government. Secondly, the government came out with a production-linked incentive scheme to create size and scale of manufacturing in India, so that companies can become bigger, biggest in the world from India. The entire objective of the production-linked incentive was that you make large companies which are able to then penetrate global markets and can then have tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 manufacturers in India. MSMEs can grow only if there are large companies, and there should be a backward-forward linkage. So government has done its bit. Now the private sector needs to do its bit.
Okay, so the private sector needs to be the Hanuman, that Nirmala Sitharaman often speaks about. But I've been speaking to a lot of diplomats lately, Amitabhji, and all of them are in unison on one point, that the scale, the manner of creation and execution of the G20 summit is something which people have not seen, in a very, very long time. Talk us through the relevance of G20, the importance let's say on the trajectory of the India story. What is the significance you think needs to be attached to the organization, the manner in which you did, association of G20?
So one is that, G20 today is the most important grouping in the world. It's more important than the United Nations because G20 comprises of countries which account for 85% of the global GDP, account for 80% of the global trade. United Nations is a very unwieldy body. It is not able to arrive at a compromise, particularly because the Security Council is in a stage of freeze right now. And if G20 is able to decide, and as India was able to do, it was able to bring consensus on all significant issues confronting the world, whether it was sustainable growth, whether it was accelerated implementation of sustainable development goals, whether it was green development, whether it was technological transformation and the digital public infrastructure, whether it was reform the multilateral financial institutions, and whether it was women-led development. On all these, 83 paras, 217 outcomes, India was able to bring consensus on every single issue confronting and challenging the world today. This has never happened before.
A huge round of applause for what was honestly managed by Amitabh Kant and his team in a fantastic manner.
So that was one that it managed consensus, even on the Russia-Ukraine crisis, where the United Nations has not succeeded. Secondly, I think India did the G20 very differently. The Prime Minister's vision was that instead of doing it in just the capital city, you do meetings in all states. So we did 220 meetings in states and union territories, which means that we were able to use this opportunity to improve drainage, sewage, solid waste in every single, over about close to 60 cities of India were transformed during G20.
There's no doubt to my mind that I think G20 was a very significant milestone. But look at the times that we live in as well. These are times of global conflicts all around. Russia-Ukraine crisis you've looked at. We're now looking at what's happening between Israel and Palestine. From a government policy-making standpoint, in course of your conversations, how do these global conflicts end up impacting the policies that you all must be, grappling with as we move deeper into Amritkal?
Bhupen, there are a couple of fault lines confronting the world today. The foremost of which is that you've had a prolonged war, which is the Russia-Ukraine crisis. The second crisis is the challenge of the Israel-Palestine crisis, which is having a huge impact in terms of the calamity which is taking place in terms of the human deaths. The third is that there is a challenge of the global supply chain being still impacted because of the China-USA crisis and how that will unshape in the coming days. And the fourth biggest fault line, to my mind, is the challenge of climate action and climate finance. Because if we are not able to achieve 1.5 degrees centigrade, the Earth may survive, but we'll all go extinct. And therefore, climate action is the fourth fault line. And in all this, if you look at all these four crises, the other perspective, if you look at it from a global GDP perspective, the American GDP has remained stagnant, has stood still over a period of last 3-4 decades at about 25% of the GDP. The European GDP has shrunk from 30% to close to 14% now. Europe has seen a decline. And China's GDP has grown from 3% to close to about 18%. And India is now accelerating its GDP from, it'll grow from 1.5% to about 15-16% in the coming decade and a half. Because, so if you look at it, this perspective of the fault lines in the world and how the global GDP is changing, there's a huge responsibility, one on United States of America. Much will depend on how the American elections will play out in the coming year, which is very critical. And second is the challenge of India accelerating the pace of its growth. We are growing at about 7.3%, but we need to accelerate it further to about 9 to 10% till our Amritkal period. In the Amritkal period, this is a rare opportunity for India to accelerate its pace of growth at much higher levels. And that will give you both the soft and the hard power in the global economy.
How do we do that? How do we do that? Because manufacturing is still a question of concern. And you were pointing out that, we've been a services-led economy in a sense. There are so many new areas which are now opening up. EVs space, for instance, How do we ensure that there is the biggest chunk of allocation of resources, which will then promote manufacturing, which will then go maybe into equitable distribution of wealth, and therefore maybe promote more jobs on the ground?
So my view on this is very clear. That two critical things to be done. One is a lot of India's growth will now depend on the states. So you need to make the southern part of India and the western part of India has grown rapidly. You need the mineral-rich states of Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Bihar. UP, you've seen rapid transformation in terms of infrastructure in recent years. So if Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, UP, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, they grow rapidly, then India will grow at 10%. Because they're still at low levels of growth. They are the most populous parts of your country. And if they grow rapidly like UP is doing now, India will grow rapidly. Second is my belief that India must get into sunrise areas of growth. All the growth will come from the sunrise.
Why don't you throw some light?
So my view is that a huge opportunity for India to be the clean energy champion of the world, because we are climatically blessed. We should not only, Prime Minister has talked about 500 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. We are well on track for that. But India is the only country which has the possibility of using renewable energy to crack water and become the champion of green hydrogen. Because even if you were to do all electricity as energy, all your electricity converted into renewable, that's just 20% of your energy. The balance 80% of your energy comes from steel, cement, refinery, all this, long distance transport, fertilizer, all this is all fossil fuel. We import 200 billion worth of fossil fuel. All that needs to be converted into clean green hydrogen and driven it. The challenge is to bring down the cost of green hydrogen from $4.5 to $1 per kilogram by 2030. No other country has the possibility to do it other than India. We need to become a champion of that. We need to become a champion of electric vehicles. We need to become a champion of battery storage. We need to become a champion of mobile manufacturing. All this is critical. If we do this, these are the areas which are going to give you global growth in the coming years. And if we are able to do this, not only will you create growth, but you will create jobs. I mean, I was hearing about 20% of EV manufacturing, someone saying 20% of EV manufacturing by 2030. That's too low. Our ambition should be much higher. I mean, look at a company like BYD in China, which is controlling 18% of the global market. One company controlling 80, CATL controlling 75% of the lithium-ion battery storage market. So they've beaten Tesla. They've beaten Tesla. There's no reason why Indian car companies should not think global. They should not think of the domestic market. They should think global and capture global markets from here.
But then I must ask you, sir, just look at what's happening with Paytm, for instance, right? In the startup ecosystem, in the fintech ecosystem, there has been a lot of innovation which has been done, and companies were becoming brand ambassadors on the world stage as far as India is concerned. Do you think compliances, regulations, are these still areas of bottleneck for us in India?
So, when you grow and expand, look at what has happened in India. I mean, you must understand the story of what has happened in India. We were able to provide digital identity to every Indian, 1.4 billion. 2015 to 2017, we opened 500 million bank accounts. That means that 55% of the bank accounts opened in the world were opened in India. Every second bank account was opened in India. Then we linked it up with Aadhaar, we linked it up with mobile numbers. A huge mass movement. And today we do 46% of the real-time fast payments in the world. 46%. Last year we did 120 billion transactions. Next was China with 26 billion real-time fast payments. That was the difference. So then what happened? We did fast payments, and then you had a set of new startups like Lending Card, Pine Labs. They started giving cashless, paperless credit based on your payment history. And they were not doing paper or transactions. They were doing on the basis of your history. And then you had another set of startups like Zerodha, Grow Upstart, who started taking wealth creation to tier 2, tier 3 cities. Rural areas, they control 30% of your stock market now. And this is all cashless, paperless, on the go, on the mobile. And then you had another set of startups like Digit and Acco, etc., who started giving you insurance for your cars, for life insurance, all that on the go on your mobile in 1 minute. So what has happened in India is, because of this, you've seen huge disruption by young startups who've gone on to become unicorn, all of them. Now, there's been a rapid scorching pace of what has happened in India. Now, one or two cases of compliance, and I think what we need to build in all these startups is that they are now going to be, these unicorns will now go on to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And there is a need to bring in both self-discipline, there's a need to ensure that they bring in good compliances, that they need to bring in good discipline, so that we do not have any more startup disruptions anymore. And that is incumbent upon self-discipline, self-control, self-compliances a lot. Because later days, it will become very difficult. These young startups must be mentored, and a lot of senior people, good executives of senior companies must start mentoring these young startups so that they evolve and grow into world-class companies. That is very critical.
But, somebody was pointing out in one of our earlier sessions that earlier, foreign companies who would be thinking in terms of looking at India maybe as a 40-30% market, they're now saying that their interest in India is 85%, interest to invest in India. But the amount of time, litigation to deal with regulation, which is taking place for them in India, is still at a very, very high level. Is there a scope, is there a case, according to you, where the stakeholders sit together and this question of regulation becoming a bottleneck in India's growth can be dealt with?
So the country has done a lot on ease of doing business. It has done a lot on ease of living. It has scrapped about 1,500 laws. It has done away with a lot of paper procedures, a huge amount. But I think on contract fulfillment, on issues of that, on the ease of judicial intervention, the country needs to that's a work in process right now.
So to all the industry titans who are here, and there are experts from the field of insurance and taxation, what would your advice be to them? That in the next 5 years, as you go deeper into Amrit Kal, what is it that they should really be expecting from the government, and what should the government be expecting from them?
So I think the critical part is that the country has built top-class infrastructure in the last 9 to 10 years. We've been able to build about 40 million houses. We've been able to do about 110 million, toilets in this country. And we've been able to do 253 million individuals have got piped water connections. We've built over 75,000 kilometers of roads. This is enormous. I mean, just to give you the size and scale, 40 million houses is like making a house for every single person of Australia. 110 million toilets is like making a toilet for everyone in Germany, the whole population. 253 million water connection for individuals is like providing everyone in Brazil with a piped water connection. So the size and scale of what India has done is enormous, enormous. And now what the government has pushed for is real saturation of every single government scheme, every single government scheme. So if, for instance, government pushing for Ayushman Bharat, everybody getting a health insurance. Now 500 million Indians getting a health insurance scheme, which is digital, will really transform the lives of citizens. I drove the Prime Minister made me drive the aspirational district program. And these were the most backward districts of India. PM didn't call them, the Prime Minister didn't call them backward, he called them aspirational. We worked on it. We've transformed lives in some of the most difficult districts of India. You won't even have heard of some of them. Namsai, have you heard of Namsai district? Have you heard of Buxar district? So some of these districts are really far-flung, but we transformed the lives of citizens in these districts by bringing in competition. And I think I'm a great believer that competition among states, competition amongst districts really will help us to transform. In a large country like India, we should build the competitive spirit. We should work on outcomes. We should really put that ranking out in public domain. We should name and shame the states. We should name and shame district administration and politicians, everyone. And that's the way India will transform itself. Because India is a very large country. We need to create a huge competitive spirit amongst everybody, and that will help us to grow and prosper to higher rates.
All right, Amitabh Kant, always a pleasure speaking to you. I think your contribution to what has been achieved in India over the last 10 years, and now we're seeing that unfold on the global map, is legendary, will be spoken about for a very long time. Great to have you tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was an absolutely fabulous discussion, very informative, enriching, and thank you so much once again, Mr. Amitabh Kant, for the capsule masterclass, if I can call it that. Moving forward, it's now time to begin our last panel for today, and that is about revolutionizing the automobile sector, talking about innovations, sustainability, and future trends. Join us for an inspiring fireside chat that ventures into future of the automotive sector. Our esteemed speaker, Shashank Srivastava, Senior Executive Officer, Marketing and Sales, Maruti Suzuki India Limited, will share insights on innovations, sustainability initiatives, and upcoming trends that will shape the automotive landscape. Mr. Shashank Srivastava, may I please request you to join us on stage?
Okay, we get another shot to ask a few more questions to Shashank, and it's a pleasure because I think it's a very significant sector, very significant space. We all have been given a masterclass of sorts now by Amitabh Kant in terms of what's happening, what's the right lever to press in India. So Shashank, let's kick off. Let me start exactly from the point where Amitabh Kant has led us. that in the eyes of Mr. Kant and in the eyes of the government, this is the moment. This is the time for India. You represent Maruti, which is one of the biggest success stories of a foreign collaboration in India. Tell me from where you started to where you are, what would a company like yours be looking at, let's say, over the next 5 to 10 years? How do you reposition, repackage yourself for the forever changing demand, which the Indian consumer clearly seems to be making now?
Yeah, so great question, first of all. And thank you for that, because you're right. If you look at the last 30, 40 years, ever since Maruti Suzuki came, there's been a huge change, whether it's in terms of technology, in terms of volumes, in terms of the aspiration level of consumers, the whole buying process itself. So I remember when Maruti started, the penetration of cars in India was about 7 per thousand. Today it is 32 per thousand. Of course, still far behind the 600, 700 mark that you see for European countries. When we started, it was the per capita income was less than $500. Today we are at 3,000, and accordingly the choices, aspiration is different. The volume used to be I remember, 50,000 per year annual volume. Now that has become 4 million. 50,000 becoming 4 million. So that has changed completely. Of course, the emission standards, the technology of the car itself also has been changing, as also the consumer. So consumers have become younger. We see more women buying cars. You have the vehicle usage type changing. The powertrain we discussed a while ago. You will see, however, a huge change coming forward, not just in the consumer buying preferences or consumer buying behavior, but also in the technology itself. And it is accelerating. And that's something which is very positive for the auto industry, because it opens a huge number of opportunities, as Amitabh Kantji mentioned in his talk. So I think you would see, and the trend, if you were to ask me, is basically what is known as Case Y. Case Y is C stands for connected cars, enable where you have connectivity, and we can discuss what connected cars are able to do, including the in-car entertainment to the safety aspect and so on. A stands for autonomous. So you have connected cars, by the way, for your information, in places like Germany, US, UK, they are almost 80%, 84% of the market. India, it is about 22%. Autonomous, it is expected that one in about 40%, that is out of 10 cars, 4 cars will be autonomous by 2030. Not in India though. India mein thoda problem hai, and I'll tell you why it is a problem for autonomous cars. But in other parts, as aggregated for the world, I'm saying. S is shared mobility. Shared mobility is where you have different ownership itself, the usage, the mobility becoming service, the last mile, the transit system which will come in force will be taking into account the minimum movement from point A to B, and which means that you will have multimodal sort of transport system. And you have E, which is electrification, which means that you will have a technology which will be more environment friendly.
Let me ask you a question. Yeah. Do you think, I remember a couple of years back in course of a conversation, the Union Transport Minister, Mr. Gadkari for Road and Highways, he had said that, I'm going to do away with all diesel manufacturers, that there will be no diesel car. Do you really think in our country, is that time going to come when you'll end up becoming, I won't saying even 70% electric? I mean, look at what Mr. Kant says. He says, why are you aiming at 20%? You should aim far higher. Do you think it's possible in India?
Yeah, so just before I come to that, I was saying KC was the thing, case I explained. The Y was yearly. So every year you change this because it's evolving so fast. On the question of electric vehicles, actually there is multiple of technologies which are available for reaching the emission norms. There is nothing really about electric vehicles to be compulsory, because
should they be compulsory? Can they be compulsory?
So I'm coming, because they are essentially because of the tailpipe emissions being almost nil. In order to meet the more stringent emission requirements, you require EVs. But if you were to meet those emission norms using some other technology, it would be equally welcome because the target is not EVs, the target is emission. So you have to, and that is specified by the government. You can see a mix. There are work going on the hydrogen cell front, there is hybrids, there are other gases. In fact, CBG is actually better than EV because it takes away the methane gas from the system, which is actually the gas which is having the maximum greenhouse effect. So EVs, when I mentioned 20%, it is based on the research of which way our battery technology is progressing, on which way our charging infrastructure is getting built, on which way the cost per kilowatt hour of battery is proceeding. In fact, 20% is not the target. This appears to be what will be achieved in the industry, whereas we do not have the option or the luxury of randomly targeting 100% or something. It has to be something which is like looking realistic. By the way, the one which you are referring to, it was said that EVs will be by 2023 50% of the market. I have attended such thing. We are at 2%. So because we desired 50% didn't make us reach 50%, we are still at 2. So we have to do certain things to achieve higher percentages. The ecosystem as it looks today looks like a 20%, and that's what other people have also said, whether it is BCG or whether it is Bloomberg or whether it is the other people making, So it looks like that. Of course, it should, if we can get it up, it's very good. And by the way, EVs for India is a great opportunity for us to put our mark in the world of automobile across the globe. And that is something which I think Kansa was mentioning. We should try to make sure that this change of technology also changes our fortune in the global market, because in the global market we are still small.
But we saw what happened, prominent, without getting into any industrial names here, but I do know that a prominent industrial house, which was making sizable investments in the EV spaces, wanted to get into a tie-up with a prominent Chinese manufacturer in the EV manufacturing only. The government refused to give him the permission, ostensibly to protect the domestic market. I've spent a lot of time with Federation of Automobile Dealers Association, courtesy my friend Vinkesh Gulati here. And because of that, often I find friends from that setup tell me that a lot of intervention is required from the government side. Compliance-oriented, promotion-oriented. Why don't you talk us through some of those challenges? What is it that you really demand from the government?
First of all, if you want to promote the EVs, if that is the question,
I just want to know that is there a disconnect between, let's say, what you may be aiming for and the present compliance regulation regime? Does that need to change in some way?
No, I think as he was mentioning, ease of business is better. There are some of the things which people desire, labor laws and things like that, certainly better. We are on ease of business like 90 or ranked something like that, 91 or 92. So actually we should target number 1 in another 2-3 years time. Why should we be at 90?
Ease of business, the automotive sector is at 90.
No. Generally for India, we have done. So we should really be targeting number 1. Why should we target anything less? So, but it's not going to happen overnight. So we have to go in that direction, and I think the direction is very positive. And I would compliment the government for really, for example, the PLI scheme. It's really to give the opportunity for manufacturers to become big, think scale, and get these benefits from the government, the support, so that you can actually be very competitive, not just in Indian market, but across the globe. And that is the intention of PLI. FAME, for example. The FAME scheme is for promotion of the electrified vehicles, and related components, for example. Great work being done. Battery components, etc. We are still, getting a lot of support, and that is very important because that would help localize, and that should help bring the cost down. That should help the adoption of EVs, and that should help the manufacturers become bigger. So some very positive things are being done. Only thing is, it's not going to happen overnight. That's it. Of course, the direction is very positive.
No, I agree with you that nothing can be done overnight, and you need to spend some time in trying to figure out what your challenges are. But let's look at one of the big dreams, ambitions, may I say so, certainly of the well-heeled class in India: driverless cars. Do you think the concept of driverless cars, is it only meant for the West, or do you think it can ever happen in India?
So right now, we have driverless cars of the autonomous car. There are different levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4, and the final level is driverless. Actually, last month I was in San Francisco and I saw on the road actually a couple of cars driverless. So it's like a slightly spooky feeling how cars are moving around, but they are apparently safer, and the projection is that by 2030, as I said, 40% cars will be autonomous. 40%.
40% by
but not in
2030.
India.
I'm interested in the
Because
India story.
you have to rewrite the software. The software is that people follow rules, they stop at red lights, they don't change lane often, but that's something in India.
You say clearly that it's not possible in
No,
India.
no, not
That's what I'm
possible.
trying to
Means
ask
we
you.
can always program the software to take care of that because, for example, in our country, in fact, today morning, I was going from Vasant Kunj, where I stay, to Gurgaon, and you have to cross Mahipalpur. There are a lot of vehicles coming from the other direction.
Wrong side driving.
Huh?
Wrong side
And there are wrong side driving. And there are more vehicles coming from wrong side than on the right side. And I'm wondering, am I on the right lane or am I on the wrong lane? And they're driving so confidently, so fast, that I'm sure there is no software written so far on autonomous cars to take care of that. We can do that, of course, over here. Then as you turn that U-turn towards for Gurgaon, as you turn towards the left for Gurgaon, you find right there some cows and some other
Wild animals.
Those other such like बकरी भी है, कुत्ते भी हैं, और ये सॉफ्टवेयर नहीं है, सॉफ्टवेयर ने डिजाइन किया हुआ है कि वो ह्यूमन फिगर को रोकेट करेगा for safety if there is a human crossing. They haven't thought that how can on a highway you will find cows and bakri and dogs and all. They haven't thought about it. We have to think about it. So it's possible, but it's going to take a lot of time.
The other day my friend was telling me in the context of this Delhi-Bombay highway, Delhi-Mumbai highway, 1400 kilometers supposed to be done in 12 hours, which means that your average speed would be between 120, 130 kilometers per hour, which means that at some stage you have to hit a speed of 150, 160, 170. Do you really think in India speeds of 150, 170?
Yeah,
possible?
actually there are stretches when it happens, and if you have traveled to Lucknow, for example, you can get there. But there is always that lurking danger and for example, if you cross the Yamuna Expressway, go towards Agra, just as you cross Mathura, you will suddenly find some people crossing with that
they'll keep something on the highway,
head, and and then you wonder कि यार अभी कैसे, मतलब you will have to take care of that. And the thing is, how do they cross that highway and go into that other field?
Point I'm trying to understand from you is that there is a substantial amount of money which passengers have to pay to use these expressways. These expressways are also being built at substantial amounts of taxpayers' money only. Is there a case where automobile manufacturers should maybe look at expressways, a specific model of a car, which, if you do a costing of that particular vehicle, if you're driving it, let's say for 70% of the time on expressways, and the cost efficiency of that vehicle will work out most. Is there a case like that?
No, I don't think so from the existing data, because it's not that every day people are using the expressway. As I mentioned, the average car usage is of only about 33 to 36 kilometers a day. So it's not very often. They may not buy that car. If it's an additional car, maybe you can think about, the really rich people can think of an additional car. But in our country, about 45% are first-time buyers. About 30% or so, 32% are additional car buyers. And the replacement car buying, that is the upgradation to the new bigger cars, that's around 25, 26%. So in this case, I think it's a little difficult at this point of time. Here is the thing. We are only at 32 per 1,000. That means there is a big upside before we get into these really high-end thing. We are still trying to manage the demand. As I said, we are only at 6 million, and we will be at 6 million by 2030. We therefore need to look at how to make that ecosystem not only to meet the domestic demand, but also cater to the export demand, which would surely have to be addressed if you want to be a global player.
Where do you think in 2030 or 2035, can there be a scenario where if someone, and I'm talking of, let's say, the premium segment, if you spend 50 lakh rupees to buy a car, do you think you could get a car which could, in terms of mileage, give you, say, 20 kilometers, 22 kilometers per liter?
Oh, those already exist. The hybrids, for example, the Grand Vitara gives you 27 to 30, even today. It gives, and not only in highway, it gives you in the city.
In the city.
Because it is powered by battery, which is charged not by external electricity, but by the regenerative braking power. And as you know, in India, you have to brake a lot, and therefore it gets charged. And actually, in the urban cycle, you can get a much higher fuel efficiency from a hybrid than the conventional ICE vehicles.
Would it be fair to say that the future belongs more to hybrid category of cars, rather than simply saying that let's gravitate towards EVs or stuff like that?
Yeah, so as I also mentioned earlier, that we believe that the intermediate stage, till one particular technology becomes really the widespread, will be a multiple of coexisting technologies, which includes ICE vehicles like CNG, the biogas, flex fuel. There is work going on hydrogen as well, EVs and hybrids. Hybrids, by the way, are selling as much as EVs today, even though they are taxed at 43% as compared with EVs, where the GST rate is only 5%.
So is there a case where you look at hybrids also, the taxation, in hybrid cars needs to come down?
Sure. So that is one of the things which is being discussed within the industry, that whether, if suppose EVs are at 5%, then there are other technologies which are not, maybe in terms of tailpipe emissions, not as great, but somewhere in between, like the hybrid I mentioned, 30 kilometers to the liter it can give, or the CNG, which gives, which is also very clean. CBG I mentioned. It's like the Olympic race. 8 people run the final. The first one gets the gold. That's the EV. Then the second, which is the hybrid, gets the silver, and the third one gets the bronze. But it's not as if the number one gets the gold and all other 7s are settled.
You can't junk away,
Exactly.
various technologies.
And there has to be some calibration, is what we believe, and that is being discussed. By the way, we are talking only of tailpipe emissions. We are not talking of well-to-wheel, which is how much does it, because as long as you are making electricity from sources which are not clean, like thermal, maybe you may have tailpipe emission being low, but the production of electricity itself may be not clean. And I'm not even going into the other area, which is called cradle to grave, which is what all materials that you put in to make a product, and what it takes to get rid of it, in the sense that after its usage, how do you recycle it, or how do you, So that I'm not getting into. Purely on tailpipe, I think there is a good technology, and a mix will exist. And remember, hybrid, one positive thing is, apart from charging infrastructure not required, it's cheaper than EVs. And third is that it doesn't have range anxiety for consumers. Most importantly, there are some powertrain components which are common, which helps in localization. And localization would help the EVs also, because the powertrain components are similar, and that should bring the cost down, which should increase the adoption rate. So in that sense, a mix of technologies will exist, is what we believe.
Let me then ask you in conclusion, diesel, there's been a whole debate which has been going on in the country for a while, that you need to move away from diesel, right? What do auto manufacturers think of diesel? I mean, are you manufacturing lesser number of diesel-based cars?
Yeah, so for Maruti Suzuki, we don't manufacture diesel. We got out of it in 2019 end, and the reason is simple. The only reason why people used to have a positive thing for diesel is because it gave great fuel efficiency. The price of diesel was less than gasoline, but by almost 32 rupees. At one point of time, diesel was 58% of the market. That was 2012-13. Later on, as the rates floated, market rate, I think, the price between a liter of gasoline and diesel became reduced. Today, on an average in the country, it is around 6.5 rupees, although in Delhi it's around 10 rupees, but it's about 6-7 rupees. And the price, the differential that you pay for a diesel vehicle is now almost 200,000 rupees, 150,000 to 200,000 rupees. It does not make economic sense now to buy diesel. That's why today diesel is only at 17%, only in the mid SUV, where people are buying it for higher torque. But as you get into the gasoline, getting into the DITC, the power, the turbos, you may find that even that factor which is positive for diesel will go away. And therefore, our prediction is diesel will not be there for a very long time, especially when you see the CAFE 3 norms which come into force from 2027.
Okay. And lastly, how far are we? If I was to ask you, can we get a hybrid car, say, under 10 lakh rupees? Because that is what could really change the game, if you think that technology could ever come.
Yeah. So it all really depends on how the scale is coming.
Like a small car, but it's a hybrid car.
Yeah, surely that's possible, but scale matters. At the moment, the differential with petrol is about 2.4, 2.5 lakh, and it's currently available, for example, in our portfolio in Vitara and the Invicto. But going forward in 2030, we have said that 15% of our portfolio will be electric and 25% will be hybrid. And the balance will be CNG, CBG, then flex fuel, and so on.
Okay. Great pleasure speaking to you. I think the message from you is clear. Go for hybrid if you can. That's the message.
Mix.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and participants, what an incredible journey we've had today at the Right to Excellence Budget Masterclass 2024. I hope each one of you has found these sessions as enlightening and enriching as I have. We'd once again like to take this opportunity to thank our title sponsor, Nexa, for their invaluable support. Stay inspired, and may your path to financial excellence be illuminated with continued success. Until we meet again, this is Divya signing off from the Right to Excellence Budget Masterclass 2024. Goodbye and thank you.